saying they've made progress towards ending the war in Ukraine and on agreeing a trade deal between Britain and the US. At a news conference, Mr. Trump said he was particularly honoured for himself and his country.
About Keir Starmer's US visit set for tense talks as JD Vance criticises UK censorship laws. I'm going to get into it now.
Rita, this was a meeting that mattered. The Prime Minister, the guest of a fellow leader, the most unpredictable of his era. Would Sir Keir Starmer be able to establish a relationship, a rapport?
UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer is in for a treat next week. Well, this week coming, basically. His first visit to the US since the new administration took over.
Did you know the UK has jailed citizens for liking tweets while their Prime Minister boasts about free speech protections? In a meeting that was supposed to focus on trade relations, JD Vance confronted Keir Starmer with this uncomfortable truth, leaving him fumbling for words. What happened next shocked everyone in the room. Elon Musk, sitting quietly until that moment, unleashed a barrage of facts about UK speech arrests that Starmer couldn't deny. The meeting descended into chaos as Trump watched his allies systematically dismantle the UK's facade of democratic values. Keir Starmer was riding high on hopes when his plane landed in the United States. The White House encounter was supposed to be his high point, an opportunity to demonstrate his diplomatic skills and solidify the special relationship between the United States and Britain. Comprehensive briefings on trade agreements, defense collaboration, and climate efforts had been prepared by his advisors. JD Vance was what they hadn't anticipated. The meeting began in the Oval Office with sufficient courtesy. As Starmer discussed shared values and democratic principles, there were handshakes, camera flashes, and rehearsed smiles. However, 15 minutes into what ought to have been civil diplomatic theater, Senator Vance completely altered the course of events. "Mr. Prime Minister," Vance said, in a tone that was deceptively informal, "I've been keeping up with some worrying developments in the UK about freedom of expression. A British national was imprisoned just last month for sharing a meme that your government considered to be grossly offensive."
Where so many other world leaders appear to be failing. And on the substance, what about Ukraine? And what about trade? Here is what's been happening here this evening.
Even before Vice President JD Vance touched on this visit in an exclusive interview published on Wednesday by the National Pulse, it was clear from the way that Anglo-American ties are developing or deteriorating.
He loves his country, and so do I. That's our common theme. He loves his country, and I love our country, and we also have two countries that have gotten along
on a number of key issues that Starmer's trip could be a tense affair. But now, Vance has confirmed that the topic of free speech will also be on the table.
Could you elaborate on how that relates to the democratic principles you stated? There was silence in the room as the conversation strayed into area that Starmer hadn't expected to defend on the international stage. His once assured manner clearly weakened. Vance was far from done. He enumerated each case in turn. A 51-year-old Army veteran was arrested for retweeting a pride flag meme. A lady was questioned by police for just liking a gender-critical social media post, and Isabel Vaughan Spruce was arrested for silently praying outside an abortion facility in Birmingham. Starmer's unease became increasingly obvious with each example. "These aren't isolated incidents," Vance went on, "but rather a pattern that your government is monitoring. Your administration's proposed online safety bill effectively criminalizes speech that is perfectly acceptable under democratic norms elsewhere." Trump, who had been unusually silent up until now, pushed forward in his seat. Known for his own struggles with censorship, the former president appeared to enjoy seeing the British leader falter under Vance's meticulous interrogation. Starmer's response was caught on camera. "I'm very proud of the UK's long history of free speech," he declared, raising his voice a little above normal. "Our laws simply ensure that harmful content doesn't lead to real-world violence. So arresting a grandmother for silent prayer prevents violence." Vance jumped on this opening. Or arresting someone for posting a joke on the internet. His interrogation revealed the basic inconsistency at the core of Starmer's argument. Starmer tried to shift the conversation back to trade, but Trump interrupted. "Interesting approach to free speech you've got over there," he said bluntly, as usual. "Sounds like you're proud of giving people the freedom to say only what you approve of."
This was an extraordinary couple of hours, Rita. I've never quite seen the Prime Minister being as tactile as he was in public with a fellow leader, perhaps picking up on a bit of the...
Not something the Trump administration considers one of the UK's strong suits at the moment. In fact, London has been repeatedly criticised, particularly for its sweeping censorship law and the Online Safety Act.
Tactics of the French president the other day, and recognising that there's a president here who delights in the public stage, delights in nonchalantly running away from remarks that he
threatened free speech and big US tech companies' business interests. Vance recently made waves at the Munich Security Conference when he schooled.
Later, White House employees called the mood glacial. The discussion, which was supposed to last 45 minutes, ended up lasting almost 2 hours, as Starmer was forced to defend policies that seemed more and more incompatible with democratic ideals when exposed on a global scale. The Prime Minister was further entangled in contradiction by his attempts to differentiate between harmful speech and protected expression. Starmer's answers grew more defensive and circular as Vance pressed him to provide precise boundaries. The UK has always balanced freedom with responsibility, a visibly agitated Starmer insisted. That's a convenient phrase, Vance responded, but in practice, it seems your government has simply criminalized political disagreement. Starmer's experience as a former director of public prosecutions made this clash more harmful. The former head of Britain's criminal justice system was now having difficulty defending its use in cases involving speech offenses. Sensing Starmer's weakness, Trump let Vance keep the lead, while he watched the Prime Minister's increasing unease with scarcely disguised satisfaction. Trump reportedly nodded occasionally in agreement with Vance's arguments, which further diminished Starmer's power in the room, according to witnesses. When Vance produced printed copies of British police comments urging people to report non-crime hate incidents, basically recording people's free speech in criminal databases without accusation or trial, the argument heated up even further. Vance handed the documents across the table and said, "Mr. Prime Minister, could you explain how your proud tradition of free expression is supported by recording people's lawful speech in police databases?" What was supposed to be Starmer's diplomatic victory had turned into a global disgrace by the end of the summit, despite his confident arrival.
Things the whole time. So a couple of other things, for instance, the row that we brought you about the Chagos Islands, that archipelago in the Indian Ocean, the UK's plan to hand it over,
but are in reality undermining, something the VP summed up as the treat from within. Vance at the time paid special attention to our very dear friends, the United Kingdom.
About that, perhaps surprisingly, the President saying in the exchanges tonight that he thinks the deal in which the military base there would be rented back,
what he clearly considers to be a form of persecution of British citizens on religious and or ideological grounds.
The Prime Minister exited the White House looking rattled, as evidenced by his tight-lipped grimace in press shots. However, the worst was still to come. One spectator in particular, Elon Musk, became particularly interested in Starmer's free speech dilemma as word of the altercation spread to the media. The internet tycoon saw a chance to spread Vance's criticism among his millions of followers after he and British authorities had previously clashed over speech problems. Musk abruptly blew the lid off Starmer's well-crafted image. The CEO of Tesla turned what might have been a small diplomatic snag into a worldwide discussion on freedom of expression when he used social media to highlight the obvious inconsistencies in the UK government's position. The public's reaction was swift and divided. Many people supported Musk's position, while others charged that he was ignorant of the subtleties of British law. Perhaps more telling was what transpired next. Instead of returning to Britain as the self-assured world statesman he had planned to be, Starmer fled back. Rather, he had to deal with a country that was now publicly doubting the government's adherence to principles that they had long accepted. Many people in Britain have been forced to face difficult issues about how much the right to free speech has been undermined under the watchful eyes of those who claim to defend it, as a result of the clash, which has prompted a fundamental re-evaluation of British society.